I don't know. I needed to hear those songs, and I appreciate it. This is the very last message of God Behind the Scenes series. So either you are incredibly excited or you're super sad, whatever. But either way, it's the very last one, and we are going to go out with a bang. We're going to make it hopefully good. 5 years ago this August, I just finished doing a retreat with our youth group. We do a retreat at the beginning of every school year, and just finished the retreat. At the end of the retreat, the very next day, I went to Gold's Gym, and I was playing basketball. I like basketball. I'm not that great at basketball, but I like it. So I'm at Gold's Gym playing basketball, having a good time. Everything's going great. And I'm on a fast break, which if you don't know what any basketball terms, that means that you're out ahead of everybody else and you're trying to get the ball down fast enough so that you can score before the defense is able to stop you. So I'm on this fast break and I'm going as fast as I possibly can, which is kind of like a snail in water. It's not very quick, but I'm going as fast as I can. And I got the ball in my right hand, I'm dribbling, and I go to take the ball from my right hand, dribble it to pass to my left hand so that I can make a hard cut to my left. And as soon as I make the hard cut to my left, my knee blew to the right. Yeah, it was fun. And by fun, I mean horrible. And so my knee blew to the right, and I dropped. I mean, instantly dropped, screaming. I mean, it was ridiculously painful. I've never had anything in my life more painful. So, like, ladies, you're like, I had childbirth. I'm like, let me tell you about my thing. And so it was horrible. It was horrible. And this is, and I'm going to try to not, like, because I know sometimes medical stuff can freak people out. It doesn't freak me out. If you want more details, ask me afterwards. But this is when I knew there was a major, major problem. First, I tried to, like, get up because I'm kind of like, oh, tough it out. And then as soon as I tried to get up, I looked down. And if you can, like, see your knee, the front part is kind of like smooth where it goes there. Mine had a cave. Like, it dipped in the very, yeah, so I'll end with that. It was like, legitimately, there was a valley in the front. And I'm like, well, that's not normal. So it was fun. Like, I've kind of had these sometimes out-of-body experiences where, like, this is horrible, and then I'm thinking, this is going to be a great sermon one day. And so, proved it. Okay, so this is happening, and it's awful. I am screaming. Some people who asked me after this happened, the first question they asked me was, did you cry? And I'm like, honestly, I was in so much pain, I couldn't even think about crying. Like, it was horrific. And trainers come in, they're checking on me, all this type stuff, and I call Megan, she's at work, and I'm the one who's supposed to be picking up, at the time, our daughter was just kind of started a little daycare, and I was the one who was supposed to pick up our daughter, and so I call her work, and I was like, hey, honey, how's it going? I'm not going to be able to get the kid, what's for dinner? And I tore my knee up. And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's for dinner? No, I'm just teasing. No, she was like, well, oh my gosh, what happened? And I tell her all that happens, and the ambulance, the paramedics, they come, they get me, put me on the stretcher, which there's nothing more embarrassing than having a stretcher taken through all these, like, guys, like, doing bench press, and they're like, oh, look at the weakling. And so, I get taken to Winter Haven Hospital. Actually, here's a picture of me at Winter Haven Hospital. Oh, hey, it's a good-looking guy, yeah. Even when my knee's busted, I'm still like, life's good, Jesus. And so my knee is totally jacked up, and they do some x-rays. They do x-rays while we're there. And I'm thinking, like, because I only know really, like, ACL or MCL injuries. Those are really kind of the only knee injuries I knew about up to this point. And the doctor comes back, and he's like, you tore your patella tendon off of your kneecap. And I'm like, my patella who? Like, what is, I don't know what that is. And what it is that's the tendon that connects the top half of your knee to the bottom half of your leg. Like, I completely tore it off my kneecap. So it was done for. And I was like, okay, so what's my next step? And the doctor's like, you got to get surgery quickly. You got to get surgery in the next couple of days. If you don't get surgery in the next couple of days, you run the risk of your leg locking up and you never being able to bend your leg again. You got to get surgery quickly. So I'm pretty good at assessing information. When it's a high-stress situation, I'm pretty good at assessing information and figuring out what needs to happen. So we go into work mode. Okay, we got to call doctors. We got to find a surgeon who's going to do this. Then we meet with the surgeon, and we have surgery on my knee. And this is where it gets worse. This is where it gets worse. If you thought it was bad at this point, the surgery and all the stuff, the hospital, all that stuff was painful. But then what happened after the surgery is I had to have rehab. I had to have physical therapy. They couldn't do physical therapy right away after the surgery because they needed a few days for it to heal. And so about 5 days to a week later, I started physical therapy. But the problem was that in physical therapy, my leg had locked up, like completely locked up. And I couldn't bend it whatsoever. Literally, the doctor, this was physical therapy for me. The doctor took my top of my calf and my thigh, and he would just try to bend my leg. He would try to bend my leg, but it wouldn't bend. I mean, it's like, imagine trying to take a 2x4 and just bending it. And every time he bends it, I'm screaming, blood curdling, which was super great for the people in the waiting room. They're like, oh God, what's going to happen to me? Because I'm like, ah! And so they're freaking out. So sometimes I might have exaggerated, I don't know, but people come in like their eyes are huge, like, oh man. Every single day, most physical therapy, you go 3 times a week on some kind of knee injury. You go 3 times a week. I went 5 days a week, and normally, after the first few visits, the doctor stops seeing you and he passes you on to a physical therapist. For me, I saw the doctor all the way to the very end because it was such a difficult problem. Literally, a month and a half into recovery, my knee only bent about this much. Like I couldn't bend hardly at all my leg. So I would try to bend my knee, and nothing. It was about at the 3-month mark that my knee finally, the doctors didn't even really know what happened, but at about 3 months in, it was like something broke loose inside of my knee and it was able to bend again. So for me, like, while I'm able to walk perfectly fine now and you never think about my knee, like I think about my knee all the time because I remember about a month and a half into this entire thing, I thought, I'm never going to walk normal again. I really thought that because the doctors were not very encouraging, not very reassuring. They kind of were doing their best and trying, but I honestly thought that I was going to walk around the rest of my life with this inability to bend my knee. I wouldn't be able to play sports. I wouldn't be able to walk normal. I'd always walk with kind of a straight leg. I honestly thought that. And as I began to kind of reflect on this story and my own experience, I realized that my knee injury is very similar to a lot of situations that happen in our lives. These situations that don't have explanation. It's these situations that happen in a moment but then change our life forever. You know, you get the phone call that you weren't expecting, or you get called into the boss's office and they have to downsize and they let you go, but you didn't even see it coming. Or, you know, you thought you were going to get the job and you had it all lined up and everything was going to work out, and then you didn't get the job. Or, you know, you went to the doctor and you thought it was a normal checkup, but it wasn't a normal checkup. And all of a sudden, this event, this circumstance, this one conversation, this one phone call, the text message, hey, I was in an accident. I mean, the one thing that comes our way, it changes everything. And as soon as those things happen, we kind of go into work mode. Okay, well, what doctors do I need to see? I got to make sure I get another job. I got to make sure I apply somewhere else. Or how do we get her better? Or how do we get him better? How do we fix him? And we go into kind of this work mode where we want to fix it. We want to make it better. But then after we get through that intense work moment, it's like all of the emotions that we have pushed to the side because we had work to do, they come flooding our way. And when those emotions set in, that's when the questions begin to kick in. It's like when we pause long enough to stop and listen, then all of those questions, why, God, what were you doing? What were you thinking? How could you? What are you doing here, God? Why did you let this happen? And we have all of these questions and all of these frustrations. Like, God, come on. Like, I remember thinking, like, I'm not going to walk right the rest of my life. Come on, God. Like, what are you doing? And you thought, man, I had more time with her. I had more time with him. I didn't think this was going to happen to me. I thought, this happens to other people. This doesn't happen to me. I'm not the one that gets this phone call. I'm not the one that loses their job. I'm not the one. And where are you, God? I've been faithful to you. I've obeyed you. I've done what you ask. What are you doing, God? It's almost like the silence gives way to the worry and the anxiety and the questions. This is why I tell people after they lose a loved one that leading up to the funeral and the service is hard, but afterwards is harder, because then the house is silent. And that's when the hurt really kicks in, and the questions really kick in, and the questions really come your way. And what do we do when there's no explanation? We can't see what God is up to. We don't understand what he's doing. We don't see how he's working. We have all of these questions, but very few answers. And what do we do when there's absolutely no explanation to be had? Well, thank God, the Scriptures answers that question for us. And for us, it answers it through a book of the Bible. Now, this book of the Bible, the main character of this book of the Bible is somebody that we can relate to, and it's one of the reasons we love this character in the Bible so much is because we see ourselves through their circumstances. We see ourselves through what they've gone through, and we can relate to them. Here's what I love about the Scriptures. Written thousands of years ago, but God knew that the struggles that those characters went through are the same struggles that you're going to go through. So we're going to look at a character called Job. Everybody heard of Job before? Okay, he had a pretty rough life, and we're going to be looking at the book of Job. Now, the bad news is we're going to go through all 42 chapters. Okay, so you laugh, I'm not kidding. But I'm not going to read all 42 chapters, and I promise that I will get you out by next Sunday. So, but before we dive into the book of Job, I want to tell you this. If you want to dive more into the story of Job, then you need to get onto Right Now Media. If you attend our church, even if this is your very first time, you have access to Right Now Media. It is a digital library of thousands and thousands of Bible studies and small group lessons and things like that. You need to get onto Right Now Media. Now, if you don't know how, there's a card right in front of you that'll walk you through how. You need to get on Right Now Media, and then there is a series of videos done by the Bible Project that give you an overview of each book of the Bible. There is one on there for Job. It is an incredible, incredible resource tool. It's about an 8 to 10 minute video that just gives you the entire big picture of the book of Job. And if you're wanting to kind of dive in and take your next step to learn more about Job, you need to go check out that video. I use it in my study. I used it in my study before this. It was a very, very good resource. Actually, for my devotion as of late, I've been going through each video every morning, going through a video a morning until I finish the books of the Bible. It's a great resource. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the book of Job and we're going to break it down into 3 different sections. And each different section deals with a perspective of what to do when there's no explanation. Because you'll kind of see if you actually read through the entire book of Job, it's broken down into 3 different sections very easily. So for a very, very rare, don't get used to it, I'm going to have a 3-point sermon. You're welcome. Okay, so let's dive in and find out what happens to Job right out of the gate. We're going to be in Job chapter 1, verses 13 through 19. If you don't know where the book of Job is, okay, take your Bible, look at the very middle with your thumbs, open up the Bible, that'll be Psalms. Go one book over and you'll be at Job. Okay? Got it. Or just push Job on your iPhone. Either one. Whatever works best for you. Job 1:13 through 19 is where we're going to be. It says, one day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the older brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And if it wasn't bad enough yet, while he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. Man, talk about a pretty bad day. I mean, Job has it all. Job's got the money. Job's got the house. Job's got the family. He has everything. It is all put together for him. He is set for the rest of his life. And then, in just a couple of conversations, everything went south for him. Your land, gone. Your cows, your sheep, your goats, all that, gone. Your children, gone. All of it is gone. And in a moment, it goes from perfect, beautiful, put-together world to everything is shattered. And isn't that how it works for us too? I mean, our day starts off so bright and so beautiful, and our week seems so perfect. And then, one thing happens. It's like the world that was so put together and pieced perfectly shatters and falls apart into a million pieces. Almost the rest of the book of Job, Job is kind of complaining to God, like, God, what are you doing? He's a little bit angry, he's a little bit bitter, he's a little upset. He's exactly what you and I would be. That's why I love the book of Job, is it's real, it's authentic. It's not like he puts on some fake face where he's not upset. I mean, he is really legitimately upset. Listen to these words from Job 10:18 through 22. Why then did you bring me out of the womb? I wish I had died before any eyes saw me. If only I had never come into being or had been carried straight from the womb to the grave. Are not my few days almost over? Turn away from me so I can have a moment's joy before I go to the place of no return, to the land of gloom and utter darkness, to the land of deepest night, of utter darkness and disorder, where even the light is like darkness. I mean, Job feels the weight of his world crumbling, and he just kind of looks at God and he's like, I wish I was never even born. I mean, God, why did you even bring me into this world? If this is what life is going to be like, God, why did you even do that? Why did you even let me be born? And I love this. I love this because, man, don't we have these kind of honest God conversations when it's just us and God, and we're kind of like, God, why? I've been good to you. I've followed you faithfully. I've done what you've asked of me. Why would you let this happen? Why did you let them get sick? Why did you let me not get that job? Why did you do this, God? It would be better if I was never born. Because here's the thing. Pain and hurt are a reality. And we don't have to respond as followers of Jesus pretending that pain and hurt and anger and all of these things don't exist. We don't have to. We have the freedom to do that. But here's what I want you to notice about Job. He is totally honest with God. He has this dialogue with him where he's upset. It's like, God, why did you even let me come into this world? But he also does something else in the midst of this. Job 2:9 through 10 says this. His wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. See, Job was unbelievably authentic about his struggles and his hurts. Like one of the things that it's just confusing to me, like in this kind of Christian world, we kind of have this philosophy that's like, if you're just positive and you pray about it, there's no real hurt and pain. That's crazy. Like, it hurts. It stinks. Life is painful. Man, it hurts when a loved one dies. It hurts when you don't get the job. It hurts when you get let go from the job. It hurts when your kids run away from the faith. It hurts. It really hurts at the core of who we are. And it is okay to feel all of that. It is okay to be frustrated. It is okay to be angry and upset. Notice, it's okay to struggle with the pain, but don't blame. And that's your first blank. Struggle with the pain, but don't blame. Struggle with the pain, but don't blame. When there's no explanation, you can't figure it out. When there's just like, you don't know what to do, man, it is all right to struggle with the pain. But don't blame God. See, that's what Job's doing. And that's why at the end of the book, God gives Job all of this credit. That he's like, okay, you struggled, but you didn't blame me. And when we get into these moments of hurt and no explanation, man, I don't want us to fake it. I want us to be real. It's kind of like this. A healthy marriage, sometimes you're going to get upset with your spouse. But you don't leave your spouse. See, you don't run away from your spouse. But many of you, the reason you left the faith is because you got upset with God and you left God. The reason you grew up in church and then you found out some stuff or something happened to you and you got mad with God, and when you got mad with God, you left God. And what this is teaching us, what Job is telling us is, man, it's okay to struggle. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to be honest with God and real with God and pull off the facade. It's okay, but don't blame God. Don't blame God. So that's the first perspective. And I got to say this as a side note. One of the reasons I love our church so much is because we hold on to this as a value. All the way up at the top. A few months ago, you probably know, George lost his father. And when he lost his father, it really hurt. It wasn't he didn't get up here and pretend like it didn't hurt. It hurt. And our board, our church board, that stands in authority over George, they noticed that this hurt. So they graciously gave him some time off to heal as he dealt with the hurt. And you know what George did and is doing? And he'll be back better than ever, but you know what he's doing? Struggling with the pain, but not blaming. And I got to say, you come to an amazing church. And I understand I have the microphone and I work here and I get to say that, but I'm telling you, you come to a great church that all the way at the very top, they care about your health, they care about your growth. But we're not just a church that just pretends like pain isn't real. Pain is absolutely real. But that pain can be used to draw us closer to God or to push us away. So that's the first section of Job. The first section of Job is the me section. But then we transition on this, and Job keeps having this dialogue with his friends. There's about 3 friends. There's technically 4, but we're not going to get to the 4th one. There's really 3 main friends, and here's what happens. Job talks for a little bit. He's frustrated. He's angry. He's mad at God, and then his friends respond. And then he talks again, and a different friend responds. And he talks again, and a different friend responds. And you keep having these cycles where Job talks, friend talks, Job talks, friend talks. But you learn, these friends are terrible friends. They're terrible people. I mean, we're going to walk through his friends that he had. The first friend is Eliphaz. And Eliphaz's advice to him is, God only punishes the guilty. Hear this, Job 4, 7 through 9. Consider now who being innocent has ever perished. Where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. At the breath of God they perish. At the blast of his anger they are no more. Literally, let me paraphrase what has just happened. Job's entire universe has just fallen apart. And his first friend is like, well, there's probably sin in your life. Get it fixed. If there weren't sin, God wouldn't have punished you. Like, man, that's not what you need. Like, I have a friend of mine who, he quotes this to me all the time because sometimes my sarcasm gets out of hand, as you know. And so one time we're in an airport and we're just talking and I said something jerky to him. I don't even know what I said, but it was funny. But he quoted a line from Seinfeld to me. It's from George Costanza. I don't know if you've ever seen Seinfeld. But George, he's in this meeting, and there's a bunch of lawyers in this meeting, and he looks at one of the guys, and he says, hey, the jerk store called. They ran out of you. And so my friend, he just quotes that line to me all the time. He's like, hey, the jerk store called, and they ran out of you. And I'm like, okay, cool. This guy, Eliphaz, he needs to be told the jerk store needs you to not be around anymore. Like why would you do that? Your advice to your friend is, well, there's probably sin in your life. It gets worse. Bildad is the next friend. His advice is, you messed up and now God is punishing you. Surely, this is Job 8:20, surely God does not reject one who is blameless or strengthen the hand of evildoers. Like, could you imagine you find out you have cancer and your friend's first response is, you probably got it because you sinned? I mean, that's really what Bildad is like. When I was 19 years old, I was driving around South Florida with my best friend was in the car, and we got a phone call from one of our old classmates. And he says, you're not even going to believe this. You're not even going to believe this. Michael Alvarez, another classmate of ours, he just died in a car accident, or a motorcycle accident. He just died. He's gone, 19-year-old, just gone. Could you imagine going to that funeral and being like, well, he's dead because of sin? Like you wouldn't do that. But that's what these type of friends are doing. They're just giving this awful advice. And then the third friend, Zophar, he says you deserve worse. Listen, here's what he says. He says, but oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom, for he is manifold in understanding. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. He tells Job, you should have more. Like you lost all of your money, you lost all your land, you lost your kids, you should have lost your wife too. Like, what kind of friends are these? These are some terrible, terrible people with some terrible, terrible advice. And this isn't who you need when there's no explanation. Like, you don't need these type of friends around when there's no explanation. You need the type of friends who are going to walk alongside of you. You need the type of friends who are going to carry you when you can't walk. You need the type of friends, if you remember all the way back at the beginning of the year, the 4 friends who carried their friend's mat to Jesus so that he could be healed. Like, we need mat carriers. We need people who are going to walk beside us, who are going to care for us, who are going to understand our struggle and our hurt, and they're going to be there through it all. We don't need these kind of friends that are just constantly tearing us down. See, and this is one of those things that you don't really think about until it's too late to think about. You probably don't even think much about your friends until you actually really need your friends. But here's the point, and this is the second section when there's no explanation. When you don't know what to do, you need the right people beside you. When you don't know what to do, you need the right people beside you. When you don't know what to do and there's no explanation and you're like Job and you're angry and you're bitter and you're frustrated and you're not sure and you can't see clearly, you need the right people beside you. Man, I've seen this happen recently with some people who've lost loved ones, and in the middle of losing loved ones, they have just had a score of friends walk alongside them. When they can't think clearly, they help them. When they can't make a meal, they make a meal for them. When they don't know what to do, they're there for them. And when you just aren't sure, what to do and there's no explanation, you need the right people beside you. Now, for everybody who has good friends, you could ignore this next part, okay? Just ignore this. This is a little side note, but I need to address a subset of people. You can either be alone and lonely, or you can be known. You can either be lonely and alone, or you can be known. And many of you, the reason you are lonely and alone is because you just kind of live by the I don't need anybody else. I don't need anybody else's help. I don't need them to help me. I don't need them to be there for me. You just kind of keep your arms crossed and you just think, I can do it on my own. I can handle it my own. I can build it my own. I can make it my own. I can do it. It's me and I don't need anybody else. And I'm telling you, that pride is going to totally get in the way, and there is going to come a day where you need somebody else and you look around for them and there's nobody. You have the choice. You have the choice. You can be lonely and alone, or you can be known. I can't fix you and I can't make you know that you need people, but I'm telling you, you need people who are going to walk beside you, because there's going to come a day where that phone call happens that changes your world, and you better have somebody else that you can call on that day. So the first section is the me section, that we struggle with this pain, but we don't blame. And the second section is the them. Like when you don't know what to do, you need people beside you. And let's dive into the last section. So Job keeps having this conversation with his friends, but he's also having this conversation with God where he's frustrated and he's angry. And he finally kind of like holds up this piece of paper, this contract, and he's like, I've signed this piece of paper with all these questions. God, you better answer me. Why did you let this happen? And at the end of Job, God finally speaks. And it's a little bit scary. Megan and I were talking about this last night at the dinner table. I was telling her, like, Job is a little bit of a scary book at the end. It's not necessarily a feel-good book. It's kind of a little intimidating, the idea of, like, how God responds to Job. Because listen to this. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Holy cow, out of the storm he spoke. He said, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. Honestly, I wish he'd said boy. Brace yourself, boy. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand who marked off its dimensions. Surely you know who stretched a measuring line across it, or where were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstones, while the morning songs or the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. So Job is so frustrated at God, and why would you, and how could you? And God looks at him and he's like, hey, let me ask you a question. Where were you when I spoke and the universe came into existence? Where were you at when I knew how many stars to put into space? Where were you when all of that was happening? You were nowhere. You were nowhere. See, God is helping Job see a totally different perspective because God sees the entire picture. God sees it all, beginning to end. He knows what is happening. And we are stuck in this little finite little moment where we take our finite little bit of information and we're like, God, what are you doing? And God is saying, whoa, I am God. I see all of it. See, Job had fallen into a trap that all of us fall into. And here's the trap he had fallen into. The farther removed from a problem, the simpler the solution seems. The farther removed from a problem, the simpler the solution seems. Here's what I mean. All of you, you have solutions for how to fix healthcare that happened, and all of us just know exactly what we would have done in that situation. I mean, we would. How many of you watch college football on a Saturday and you're like, if I was the coach, I would have? No, you wouldn't have. First of all, if you were, you would have been a college coach, but you're not. So, the farther removed from a problem, the simpler the solution seems. In Job, he doesn't have God's perspective. He can't see all of the universe. He can't see all of the lives of all of the people in the entire world. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. But just because he has his own little circumstance, he thinks he knows the entire picture. But God tries to give him this different perspective. When I was a youth pastor, during the summer, I would lead a thing called Drive Student Leadership, which was just kind of a leadership intensive. We'd study the Bible for about an hour. We'd do some ministry experience. We'd do some leadership stuff. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. And invariably, as I was a youth pastor, I would always get this question, and it would typically happen at the end of an event. And the question would be, hey, why don't we do more events? Can we do more events? I mean, there's always happened. Can we do more events? And I love them, and I'd be like, maybe, or I'd say I pray about it, which means no. And so they would always ask me. But during Drive Student Leadership, I would help them see a totally different perspective. I would put my name at the top. When I was the youth pastor, I'd put my name at the top, and I would ask the students, I'd say, okay, who is it my responsibility to think about and to minister to? So they'd say, okay, well, students. So I'd draw an arrow to my name, and I'd write students. I said, okay, that's good. Who else? Who else? And they're sitting there thinking, and they're like, well, parents. Yeah, okay, so parents, good. Parents. Okay, so who else? Youth leaders. Yeah, perfect. So I'd write students and youth leaders and parents. And I would say to them, when you ask me, can I do an event, you are asking from your perspective over here, just taking it to me. And you just see your little bubble. You're like, I got a Saturday off. I could do it. But for me, I look at it from my youth leaders work 45, 50 hours a week, and I don't want them to have to do another event on top of all the other things that they do and give. And parents only have a finite amount of money, and they just can't do all of their resources just on another little event. And so when I'm looking at doing another event, I'm not just looking at it from your one perspective. I'm looking at it from all of these other perspectives. And it was like every time I explained this to students, it was like their world opened up, and they're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And God is taking Job and saying, ooh, you're just looking at it from you. I have all of this. I have everyone. You can't see the entirety of the picture. You don't understand, but I have a plan. And this is the last section of when there's no explanation. We're almost done. When there's no explanation, God has a plan, even when we don't understand. When we can't figure it out and we don't know, and there's so many questions, and there's way more questions than there's answers, God has a plan, even when we don't understand. I'll tell you what, you're going to, at the end of the service, as you walk out, you're going to get a little card that has this diagram on there, where it has the me, them, him, where it just deals with these three different categories. Now, I want you to take this and put it in your wallet, or put it in your purse, or put it on your nightstand, or put it on the mirror. I want you to put it somewhere, because here's the deal. You might not be going through anything today. Honestly, life might be great for you today. I mean, you just got the promotion, you just got the job, your family's healthy, everything's great. But there's coming a day where there's no explanation. And when there's no explanation, I want you to remember through Job's story, how do I get through this? God is always working in our life. And I hope that this series, I mean, for me, it has ministered to me so much. I hope that you have seen that God is behind the scenes through the mountaintops and through the valleys. God is behind the scenes working and accomplishing something for His glory and His good and your benefit. This is why, and this is where we'll end here. If you got a chance to talk to some Christians who are committed to Jesus and they love Jesus at a soul level, they would be able to tell you story after story of how God has been able to take temporary pain and use it for eternal gain. Let me say that again. If you were able to sit down and just have coffee with somebody who has passionately pursued Jesus, they would be able to tell you that God can take temporary pain and use it for eternal gain. So just know that whatever it is you're going through, when there's no explanation, God has a plan, even when you don't understand. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I get that sometimes we don't have answers, and you don't even seem to give us those answers, but you seem to tell us to trust you, to rely upon you. And God, that's what we want to do. We want to just lean on you in our darkest days, and we want to rely upon you in the times when doesn't seem to be a lot of hope, doesn't seem to be getting any better. And God, I pray that you just encourage our souls. God, we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, a few quick things. So don't get up and leave quite yet. Just a few quick things. Number one, topics like this seem to bring to the surface some challenging issues that are probably in your life. If you are one of those people that this resonated with you and you just have some things that you're struggling with, there are prayer partners up front that want to pray with you. And they want to just encourage you and pray with you. Let them do that. Come to the front right at the end. Number two, do go see the table out there where the Haiti Hope sponsors are at. I'm telling you, I don't just say this. They are some incredible people who they give up hours. They all have full-time jobs outside of this, so they spend hours doing a great work. You need to go check out the table and maybe sponsor a kid today. Last but not least, don't forget your tithes and offerings on the way out. We love you very much. We'll see you next week.